The following presentation is sponsored and approved by the THC. The Tinfoil Hat Council is a nonprofit organization that rents a room in an undisclosed Tenderloin homeless shelter. $5 was raised in a GoFundMe last week to create the following. An overall lack of funding is why there is no video or pictures inserted into this presentation. Getty Images owns every picture ever taken. Hans Zimmer was solicited, but he would not agree to produce an original score for this production after being offered as much as $4 of the $5 raised. The following is rated AGA, or Aunt Ginny approved, and it's designed to be a tool for low or no self-esteem conspiracy theorists, to use. So a strange family will one day invite them back to the Thanksgiving table, or old friends will once again call them up for a baseball game. The white paper is titled, "What is a Conspiracy Theorist? A Desperate Cry to be Invited Back to Thanksgiving." And why it's a white paper, it makes it more legitimate than just saying some schlep just wrote this out. It's a white paper. What is a conspiracy theorist? The answer to this question is actually quite simple, and it's not what most people have been led to believe about these outcasts. If you have a conspiracy theorist in your life, we ask that you be open-minded when listening to the following presentation in order to better understand your brother, your cousin, or your best friend whose society is deemed to be even lower than the lowest caste in India. I don't know what that caste is called because the THC has no research budget, not even for a simple Google search. Before beginning the formal part of this presentation, we'd like you to hear from one of our own to show you we're regular people too. We're not all post-suicidal circus freaks. We belong at your Thanksgiving table, not out back with the bearded lady and the man who tries to stuff himself into a small box.
Hey, all you regular people listening to this. My name's Kurt. I'm the THC president. I know you all have a conspiracy theorist in your life. Everybody does nowadays. Because there's been a series of retarded U.S. presidents going back about 30 years now. You see, that's left millions of people like us questioning if politics is anything more than pro wrestling. I guess what I'm saying is, our numbers have swooned. Is that the right word? Swooned?
Swelled.
Fuck it. The insanity on the news for the past 20 years has led to, let's just put it this way, a big-ass group of people questioning what they're being told about how the world works. You see, the people who run the banks and run the corporations, they don't want good people like yourself to ever understand how much you've been screwed. Remember the movie Gladiator? And Commodus, played by Joaquin Phoenix? That still exists today. That shit's still here. But they wear a suit instead of armor. Yeah, Commodus was gentle compared to these assholes. Anyway, please keep an open mind as you listen. And remember, there's one of us in your family right now. There's one of us in your circle of friends. Give them a hug before you try to have them committed to Shutter Island.
Thanks, Kurt, I think. A conspiracy theorist is simply one who questions how things operate in this world, with the second part of the definition of what a conspiracy theorist is being responsible for why they get run off from the Thanksgiving table. Part 1, they question how things in the world work. After they ask their questions, they look into things themselves. That's not allowed anymore. And then, even worse, they don't necessarily believe the official and accepted answers provided by, say, the news or by the corrupt politicians. The average person then steps up to the conspiracy person in their circle and says, yeah, you guys don't trust any form of authority, do you? That's what makes you guys nuts. But does it, though? We'll see. When surveyed, most people on the street, most people in, say, the West, would state, on record, that they don't have any trust in their politicians. Almost all would say their politicians lie. Of course, we know for sure that more than 90% would respond this way. You've heard all the stories. Congress just received an approval rating just above bacteria. People will complain and say the same thing in general, not just about their politicians, but about government. Of course they do. We've all heard this before. So then certain things happen in the world or presented on the news, and the conspiracy person says to their group of friends or their family, I don't believe what this government official is telling us. Then the friends and family of the conspiracy person, who had gone on record for like 3 decades in a row stating that they have no trust in government, they call the conspiracy person crazy for not trusting government. What? I guess to the non conspiracy people, this hypocrisy, this insanity makes sense. I know the THC said there was no budget for images, but we went back to the League of Nations. We don't even think Getty Images can come get their greasy hands and claim copyright on this one. Here it says, if you're driving and can't see it, just an old clip from the League of Nations, which was a failed establishment, as every single major government establishment has failed. The French government will devote itself passionately to this work of peace. What work of peace, Matt? What is he referring to? Well, it's about Italy's invasion of Ethiopia, but that's neither here nor there. See, the point in this picture, every single time a representative of government has come forth to a podium and said, in this case, the French government will devote itself passionately to this work of peace, it's been the opposite. They've devoted themselves passionately to either killing indigenous peoples or to promoting war. So just here, we'll just finish up with the French here. Like if we did the United States, we could do this for 4 or 5 days. The French, what were they doing in Vietnam? The French started the Vietnam War. The U.S. just came in and said, oh, we'll take care of this. What were they even doing there? Is that... that's not the Rhine or the Ruhr Valley. The last time I looked, what were they killing? No matter what the local Vietnamese, Indo-Chinese were doing, bad, good, or indifferent, what were they even doing there? I mean, sorry, let's get back to the formal presentation. The THC has allowed me a new image. They say that even Alamy stock photo, this one's so old that even Alamy can't get their greasy fingers and claim copyright on this one. But we'll see. These greasy companies are going back and somehow claiming copyright on things that are over 150 years old. But that's neither here nor there right now. Let's continue. The conspiracy group is diverse. They agree that regarding the most important things in this world, we're generally being lied to. Now, who is screwing over the people, and how are the people being screwed? That gets into the details of the second level, where some conspiracy people may disagree with each other, but they all agree that generally the good people are being screwed over by most forms of authority, government, corporations, etc. Okay. Some, though, here's where it gets into the weeds, and this is where the conspiracy people get a bad reputation. Some people, this little group over here, believe it's aliens. Some here, oh, these are the demons of Satan, walk the earth. No, it's the aliens. No, it's Satan. Others speak of ancient families who have controlled the banks for thousands of years. Once they get in the weeds, then they start infighting and they disagree. And these crazy theories, this is where they get into trouble with the regular people. Because the world has devolved into something that's generally unrecognizable to what existed just 2 decades ago, conspiracy people then try to talk with friends and family about the devolving state of affairs. This is where things go bad. The people around the conspiracy theorists, say their circle of friends, sure, they'll complain about government, or they'll say that Senator Casey for Pennsylvania has been up there forever and nothing's ever accomplished. He hasn't done anything. And they would be right. There's some Senator Casey for Pennsylvania, he's never done anything but basically eat the free buffet. But see, the conspiracy person sees these things happening, this amongst tens of thousands and other things, says there's something very wrong going on here. Where the normal person just says, this is kind of normal. All this craziness is just the modern evolution of what a society and culture turns into. Okay, fine. So there's some disagreement there. But then the conspiracy person, for continuing to probe into it and for continuing to look at answers to all the things that don't make any sense, they become belittled for then, here we go again, not trusting the same government that the friends and family have been not trusting themselves, according to themselves going on record, for their entire lives. So we'll do this one more time. On Monday, the regular person says, this government about what's going on now or what's going on with the United States involvement here, these are all lies. These politicians are lying to you. They're thieves. Then on Tuesday, they say back, the regular group of friends say back to the conspiracy person, what's wrong with you? Why don't you trust any authority and trust any government? But you told me you don't trust them too. See, okay, that's clearly established. This insanity is clearly established. Let's move forward. A big problem occurs between the conspiracy person and the, quote, normal person, because the conspiracy person doesn't just limit their investigation to government. That's just the easiest way to introduce these topics, because everybody complains about government and everybody complains about their politicians and their presidents. That's the most benign way to get into it. But the conspiracy person looks around the entire breadth of culture and society and says there's something very wrong here. This isn't normal and natural. So at this point, the conspiracy person could basically throw a dart, and that dart could hit a certain facet of society. And the person would say, there's something very wrong here. So let's do the dart exercise now, because of course it goes far beyond things that the normal person doesn't notice. It goes far beyond complaining about your governor. So the conspiracy person, let's just throw a dart, artwork, movies, music, creativity, imagination. The conspiracy person points out there's something very strange going on, because there haven't been any excellent movies or any great mainstream music for about 20 years now. What happened to all that we were getting in the 70s in terms of great motion pictures, music, movies? Well, it just all stopped. All creativity is dried up. Something very strange is going on. Look at the recent winners of the Best Picture for the Academy Award. Coda, whatever that is, Parasite, Green Book, The Shape of Water, Moonlight, Spotlight, all back-to-back recent Academy Award Best Picture winners. I didn't even know some of these existed. I haven't seen any of them except Green Book, which was raved about, and it was an average movie. But then a similar segment, when you go back in time, just pick a 7-year period in the 90s, for example. Silence of the Lambs, Dances with Wolves, Braveheart, Forrest Gump, Titanic, Schindler's List, and the Jerry Seinfeld highly criticized English Patient. Okay, maybe English Patient doesn't belong, but how about those others compared to that horse shit that I just read? Is a breakdown in everything going on. My best friends complain about how there's no good music, but see, the conspiracy person, there's something going on here. Oh, and they come back and say, there's no conspiracy. It's all normal to them. But see, if you can show so many different examples and you get into like 100 things, at some point, can you continue to explain it away as normal? And this theme of great yesterday and sucks today, it doesn't just stop at movies. As we said, it's music, it's TV shows as well. Where's your All in the Family? Where's your Seinfeld? Where's your Cheers, your comedies, your dramas, Broadway plays? Where's your Phantom of the Opera? All forms of art. Now, the conspiracy person says, "What? I don't know exactly what's going on here. But this isn't a coincidence. This isn't how a normal society evolves when all forms of art, imagination, and expression just stop." The conspiracy person says, something weird is going on here. I'm going to try to get to the bottom of it. But that they're belittled for going there. The normal person doesn't want to hear any of that. They'll defend all of it as normal. I don't want to limit the focus here of what's going on in culture and art in 2021, and 2022 versus the 80s or the 90s. I mean, you can take some of these examples back hundreds of years. Go walk through the New York Museum of Modern Art and then go see Da Vinci's works in the Louvre. That is considered the Renaissance masters. That's a breakdown. Where's the great paintings? Where's the great works like Beethoven and Bach and Mozart and symphonies? And there are some exceptions, John Williams' score for Star Wars and Hans Zimmer. There's some exceptions, but across the board, all artworks and expressions of imagination seems to follow a similar sliding scale into devolution, if that's a word. And the regular person, for some reason, they just accept all of this as normal. That imagination and creativity in almost all forms of art is just gone from the world. I've prepared a fun and brief respite if this conversation was getting a little too intense. Let's look at this that I've prepared for you. Modern artwork, The Fountain. The Fountain is a ready-made sculpture of Marcel Duchamp. It's 1917, I think the New York Museum of Modern Art. It consists of a porcelain urinal, and it's signed R. Mutt. There's in a Sharpie marker. See it? It says RMUTT, 1917. It's an ordinary piece of plumbing chosen by Duchamp, submitted for exhibition with the Society of Independent Artists. It's a urinal. Scrolling down a bit in the Wikipedia to a portion you can't see, it says here, interventions. Several performance artists have attempted to contribute to the piece by urinating in it, by pissing in it. South African-born artist Kendall Gears rose to international notoriety in 1993 when at a show in Venice, he urinated into the fountain. I guess this piece of art makes its way around the world, like the Van Gogh exhibit made its way to the Philadelphia Museum of Art for a short period of time. Artist-musician Brian Eno declared he successfully urinated in the fountain while it was exhibited in the MoMA in 1993. Piss for accuracy, piss for distance. This is just one example among thousands. Let's not get too into the urinal here. All of art, creativity, and imagination, with a few exceptions, has been a sliding scale downward. The conspiracy theorists see this as a big problem. It's a reflection of humanity itself, where the regular person will belittle that attitude, and it's just the best a modern society can do. Continuing with the presentation, just to be a little bit more efficient, the conspiracy person is now a CP, conspiracy person, and the regular guy or regular girl, regular person is an RP, CP and RP. So it's very strange. It's not just that the RP or regular person it's not that they don't just agree with the causes and reasons provided by the CP for what they may be noticing. The RP does not even acknowledge the basic assumptions that the CP is making and acknowledge that they have any merit. So for this example, the CP says there's something wrong that all of art and creativity and imagination has evaporated in this century. And the RP, they'll be back. Great movies will be back. Matt is just a blip, and it's just normal. There's no merit from the RP's perspective in anything the CP puts forward. Never. This strange phenomenon where the RP digs in and can never give an inch to the CP in terms of what the CP is noticing about how society is degenerating, that how they dig in, that and the reasons for that is discussed a little bit later. The RP, a regular person, always has a ready-made reason to explain everything away that the CP notices. Like, it just makes sense that, again, one last time, every single decade in music of the last century had three or four major artists every decade that moved music into incredible new places. While this century can do no better than Taylor Swift or the Jonas Brothers. Watch an old episode of the Grammys from the 70s or 80s. Even if the Carpenters pop up, or Barbra Streisand pops up, and that's not your thing, it's better than Little Nas and Old Town Road or whatever he does. I mean, one is not, even if the Carpenters is not your thing. Rainy Days and Mondays and Little Nas always gets me down because that's a shit of today. They're not comparable objectively. I know music is subjective, but come on. If I scratch on a chalkboard versus the Beatles, it's objective, Matt. Somebody might like the nails on the chalkboard. No, at some point, it becomes objective. The regular person will certainly complain about how music kind of sucks. Most of my friends will gladly tell me over a beer why this music sucks. But to them, like, there's always a normal way to explain it. And if one of the friends at the table is a CP, and that CP offers up a strange explanation, the others want no part in hearing it. Changing topics, the CP points out to their friends and family that it's just not normal for a progression in this direction, where the newest American president is, quote, more retarded than the last, and it never goes back. There's never a great man or great woman inserted. It's the new president, quote, is more retarded than the last. That's just accepted. A president now is expected, like it's normal in society. It's just expected with the RPs to be, it's just normal. They're buffoons, completely buffoons, instead of the expectation of a great man or a great woman or a great P or Z or whatever they choose to identify with. This is another completely bizarre degradation. The RP will point back at, they're so desperate, they'll point back at Obama as an exception to this. But in fact, the presidents that surrounded Obama post and pre were so stupid, so much buffoons, right through Uncle Joe today, that Obama appears to be somewhat of an intelligent person when he wasn't. All he could do was read from a teleprompter. I'm not joking. You take him off the teleprompter, he just he stuttered. You take him. Great. So he was polished in front of a teleprompter. That's the great man and great woman we're looking for in a president of the United States. Other than the ability to make a smooth delivery to teleprompter, there exists no evidence whatsoever, no evidence that Obama's IQ was any higher than Clarabelle's. Look into his accomplishments. They're not there. There's nothing. Squat. None of them have any accomplishments. The trajectory of government always moves in the same direction, eroding your freedoms, adding more debt. Nothing ever changes. It doesn't really matter whether you fall on the CP or the RP side of the sliding scale. If the CP is going off, basically making a presentation saying, these presidents, you might not think they're retarded, but let's agree, they're not very impressive. Nobody's going to disagree with that. I mean, these presidents, these leaders. I mean, go across to the UK, Boris, Natasha. These are the dregs. So the conspiracy person again says something's very wrong here. This isn't normal. There's some strange things going on. But as usual, the RP has the ready-made response. They have the ready-made answer. They can bring up in a reaction to anything that the CP puts forth, no matter how many facts are on the CP side. In this case, the NP will run their scripts and say things like we've heard a million times. Well, there's got to be a reason between the reality bookends why these presidents are all buffoons. And then, well, what could it be? Well, this works for me. The RP will say, oh, they don't want to be president. Nobody exceptional in this society wants to be president. So it can be understood then why all the brilliant scientists and university chancellors and engineers and artists, they wouldn't want that job. So the only one left are these dregs. Nobody wants the job. That does explain it away to the NP. It makes no sense to the CP or anybody with a degree of common sense. No, that job would be so horrible. Immediate fame, status, power. Isn't power the one thing coveted by, quote, man more than anything else in the history of man? Power, insider trading no longer exists. You can just make yourself hundreds of millions of dollars. Women will just throw yourself at your feet if you want to be like Bill Clinton and pretend you're married. Air Force One, take vacations all the time. Private golf course, no one would want that job. But that makes perfect sense to the NP. The NP is so desperate to defend the status quo at all costs, they will pull even ludicrous scripts up to explain away what the CP notices. They will make the presidency look worse. And nobody wants the job. It's like dirty jobs. Nobody would want to do that. They'll make the U.S. presidency look worse than crawling through Bangladesh sewers to explain why no great men or women ever reside in the West Wing. The CP person questions why $700 billion of defense spending is necessary when there are essentially no bad guys in the world. China. I will get to that. China. Oh, okay. Guys in caves. We'll get to that. I mean, even goody-goody, peace-loving liberals don't mention this $700 billion spending as being a problem. I mean, you'd think that would be the first thing they're screaming about. Take $400 billion of the $700 billion and distribute it here, distribute it there. Even the goody-goodies. The liberals don't say anything. The conservatives are normally easier to fool in this area, but at least they have a reason to try to justify. It's not a good reason to us, but they have a reason they believe in to justify this defense spending. They believe, I guess, it takes almost $1 trillion a year to ward off the next guy in a cave with dripping stalactites and stalagmites, or whichever one goes up or down. Hey, at least there's a reason. The liberals just, I don't know, it's weird. They should be all over it. They kind of ignore it. For some reason, the liberal take on almost everything borders on mind control. especially their take on how they don't just raise Cain every day about the defense spending budget. But the reason for it is the liberal is so in love with big authority, with central authority, with big government, with rules and organization and big brother. They're so in love with that. And this defense apparatus is egregious and fat and disgusting and Jabba the Hutt and waste. They won't go there. It's just part of their love of big authority and big government. Now look, okay, they do from time to time, you hear certain voices pop up, but I'm talking in general. This should be the number one thing generally they're screaming about, and for the most part, they don't seem to mention it. Like just a given from a conservative, liberal, or any normal or regular RP's perspective, at least in the United States, it's just a given that defense spending needs to be in the range of 10 times the entire GDP of the continent of Africa, year after year after year. I mean, what would happen if you just took 1 year off of defense spending, used all that money on, I don't know, roads or whatever, to breed squirrels or to do something? Let's just say you took a year off and used the money somewhere else. What would you have? Would you have the man in the high castle scenario playing out? Just take 1 year off of defense spending and we wake up and all the flags have been replaced with Chinese flags. It's the man in the high castle, but China will have taken over just all the planes that have ever been made and all the missiles that have piled up and all the bullets and all the defense satellites and all that defense infrastructure. If you took 1 year off from $700 billion of spending, all that would just break down and go away. You know, here's what would happen if you took a year off. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. But, of course, the mechanism has to, it's Eisenhower, didn't you to pay attention to that speech, or the military-industrial complex? Of course, the entire system is like a living entity that has to maintain itself and has to get fatter. I know that, but this is exactly the CP's point. It doesn't make sense when you look at it closely. Why they don't take 1 year and 10 off to move the money somewhere else. That doesn't make any sense to you? We're just going to be invaded. All the missiles, the entire infrastructure is still there. There's no bad guy anyway. What I was going to say about China, China's been given the world's manufacturing, so they're just gonna, that's all going to come to an end. Every single dollar that flows in and out of China because of manufacturing, they're going to take it all over, Matt. But then they'd have no products to sell to anybody. They're not going to do anything. As usual, the CP sees these boogeymen. They're cooked up boogeymen. So people at Northrop Grumman can have a job. They're cooked up boogeymen. So people at Boeing can have a job. But that's just crazy to the regular person. You conspiracy people, you be quiet in your crazy ideas. Pentagon, take a year off and let's use the money to get everybody in the United States a new hula hoop. That would be more productive. The CP notices that some sort of strange, stalled out century is going on. Almost nothing seems to change anymore. To the NP, it makes perfect sense that Vanna White is pushing 40 years turning letters. I guess she doesn't have to turn anything anymore. They're digital. Pushing 40 years. Let that sink in. That's a lifespan that's greater than maybe 40 or 50 countries on Earth have. They were born with Vanna White turning letters, and they died on their deathbed with Vanna White turning letters. Fox NFL, just throw a dart. It's stalled out everywhere. Fox NFL, the pregame before the football in the United States, they can have no other hosts than 30-year residents Terry Bradshaw and Howie Long. Is Jimmy Johnson still there? He has to be pushing 25 years, close to 30 years for Terry Bradshaw and Howie Long. It's an NFL pregame show? I mean, I must move on. But this stalled list could go on for hours and hours, way past the few names I'll get a chance to mention in this small segment. Even that little obnoxious stock picker, Jim Cramer, he soon will be pushing 20 years making his stupid stock picks and screaming, "Booyah!" and hitting his stupid buttons and probating himself. Alex Trebek had to die to be taken off the air. Nothing ever changes. It would be one thing if this endless list of people that never go anywhere, hundreds of pages long, and all these personalities and business moguls were completely unique and once-in-a-lifetime talents who were completely irreplaceable. Jim Cramer? He might have been fun for 4 or 5 episodes, maybe 15 years ago. Then he grates on you. After just a week? Yeah, after just a week. He didn't get his, well, people do it for the money, Matt, and the stock picks. He didn't get his audience out of stocks before any of these so-called meltdowns. He brings nothing to the table. But yet he's there. How many decades will that go on? Most people find Terry Bradshaw irritating and obnoxious. I remember being on a separate issue in elementary school. I remember this from elementary school, where at least it was the announcement that the Rolling Stones comeback tour. Elementary school, it was announced. Maybe it was the year later when I was in 7th or 8th grade, whatever. But it was a big deal. Nobody that old had done a world tour that big. Nobody that old. I remember that from elementary school. I'm 51 now, and they're still doing it. But this is normal. The stalled out nature of everything is normal to the RP. We're just crazy. All the old bands in just never-ending fashion, recycled, just continue to make their rounds year after year after year. This year, I don't listen to the radio much, but I put the radio on to do some painting. It was the B-52s and ABBA, I believe. A year or two back, it was 140-year-old Rod Stewart. A few years before that, they were propping up Tony Bennett. New artists never seem to replace these people. The CP person simply says, wait a second. Something very strange is going on here. Something that probably relates to the underlying governing dynamics of reality itself. The RP then steps up and says, you're crazy, boy. You're crazy. And then they run their scripts and their fallacious logic as to why all this decade of stalled century makes perfect sense. Makes perfect sense that the Nancy Pelosi monster and the Mitch McConnell ghost haunt the halls of Congress decade after decade after decade. Like there's no new blood that ever steps up, and they run their scripts. Matt, you don't realize the power these people have. Oh, okay, yeah, I'll be quiet. I mean, but that relates to this. They want the power, right? Nancy Pelosi. Oh yeah, they want the power. Doesn't Warren Buffett or any of these old corporate moguls, they don't ever seem to go anywhere. They have to die off to go anywhere. Warren Buffett, what is he, in his 90s? He's still going to work. Doesn't anybody just retire and say, hey, I've done a lot and I've got some things to do before keeling over? Does that never happen? Yes, it's conspiratorial, but that's the main difference between the CP and the RP. The CP almost says, look, it's almost like they can't get out of what they're involved in. But then the RP, they just run their scripts and say, well, Matt, Warren Buffett, if he didn't go to work, he'd lose the power. And they're addicted to power, but that flies in the face of what we talked about the presidency, where people talking and running their scripts saying the reason they're all buffoons, Matt, they are all buffoons and we can do better, but nobody would want that job. But then you said the reason Warren Buffett won't retire is they're addicted to power. The reason Tom Brady won't retire, he's addicted to the limelight. Well, which is it? You can't have your cake and eat it too. If people are so addicted to power, then the smart people like Warren Buffett would want the presidency, right? When the CP has a discussion with an NP, there's nothing normal about the way this conversation goes down. Of course, one almost never can convince the other, and we wouldn't expect that, but there is no middle ground at all. That's what's so strange and bizarre about it. It's not just general disagreement, it's completely one-sided. One-sided. For some reason, the regular person RP can't give the CP an inch, can never acknowledge any part of what they're presenting is valid. This gives the RP away that something very strange is going on with why they dig into their positions with such ferocity. And there's no better example of this than the moon. So much time has gone by that if the RP in your lives, the regular people, were fair dealers and they were being fair, so much time has gone by to be fair. At this point, they would have to acknowledge at least the first part of the CP's preposition. They don't acknowledge it. For some reason, they can't acknowledge it. For some reason, they can't give an inch. If the world was normal, then you would think this would be the first part of the conversation when the RP talked to the CP and say, look, Matt, I'm not going to go as far as you are going to go with your crazy ass shit. But look, I have to be fair. I have to admit, it is strange that space exploration is the only technology in the history of mankind that has gone backwards, and that this much time has gone by and nobody's been back, I'll give you that, Matt. That is awfully strange. They can't do it. That's what gives them away. No, they will not ever acknowledge that it's odd that nobody's been back for pushing 60 years. They simply can't acknowledge any part of your argument as valid, or that would be cracking the door open a bit, and scary things may come out if that door is cracked open. Well, we think it's a little more than that in the CP community, but I have to keep this rather benign in case it actually was passed to Aunt Ginny. When you push back on them or any of these RPs with any sort of common sense argument related, again, here to the moon, like, well, the Charles Lindbergh crossing of the Atlantic, what if it was 50 years later and nobody else had crossed the Atlantic in a plane? Would you believe he did it back then if you knew for sure nobody's done it since? Obviously, this is third grade stuff. I'm sorry I have to present third grade. This makes sense to the people listening. This doesn't make sense to your Aunt Ginny for some reason. Of course, 50 years, I have to continue to state the obvious. 50 years after Lindbergh did it, there was like 100 scheduled flights a day with 747s going across the Atlantic and L-1011s and people sleeping up in first class, sleeping on a bunch of peanut bags and people coming and going. Well, that makes sense, Matt, because technology increases over time. But with the moon, it goes, I can say the same thing over and over again. This is so first grade, it really is frustrating to me and my CP brethren that we can't even get this basic shit across to people. Somebody is sleeping right now in a bag of peanuts, going not only across the Atlantic, they're going all over the world, and 20 hours in the air. Charles Lindbergh when he did it, he had to pee his pants 4 times to get across. Things get better over time. Technology increases, but with the RPs, that just makes perfect sense, Matt, that space wouldn't do this. You're one of those people, those conspiracy people is just somebody that presents common sense and still has a degree left inside him or her. Okay, and looking at the differences between the CP and the NP, we've been looking at kind of macro big issues. Just did a few, could do 50 more over 10 hours. But this video has to come to an end at some point. Let's just jump into the micro issues. In my book, there's a whole list, page after page, if the world were real. If the world were real, or if you prefer, if the world was real, this would have gone away. This would have been fixed. This would have been developed. This situation would no longer exist. All of these things that any first grader can notice, there's just something not right in the world that these situations exist, yet again, this is all normal to the RP. So let me just read a few to close out this presentation, a few if the world were real, and we'll go from there. If the world were real, Iran would not be 6 months away from developing a nuclear bomb for the past 15 years. They've been 6 months away for the past 15 years. Put your hands out. 15 years. 60 Minutes ran the famous Stuxnet computer virus story in 2012. The U.S. and Israeli constructed this computer virus, Stuxnet. It messed up the Iranian centrifuges without them being able to detect the problem. The centrifuges were slowed down like by 1 micromillimeter every 40,000 years. They turn 1/2 amount and they don't do their job. And it was so incredible what 60 Minutes reported. After the 60 Minutes story, and everybody knew about Stuxnet, I would think Iran would try to correct the problem. Just like General Behringer probably got rid of Joshua and the Whopper after it almost led to global world annihilation, right? You think they kept the Whopper after what happened in war games? So what the hell have the Iranians been doing for the past 10, 11 years? Oppenheimer's crew, right? They told us was able to do the damn bomb in the 40s, just working on it like a year and a half. All they had was a pencil and paper. They didn't have no IBM supercomputers back then that Iran has access to. Here's the point. Again, the CP will disagree with the NP. The CP says Iran was never 6 months away. It was some cooked up story, a boogeyman. Matt, that would never happen. That would mean our politicians were lying to us. And then the news that was getting their information from the government, they were lying to us that they said they're 6 months away 14 or 15 years ago. No, that could, from a CP's perspective, that would never happen. But haven't you, RP, haven't you said they're liars and thieves? But that makes no sense to you. Here we go with the same circular, effed up reasoning. Look at this shit. The date on this thing is July 25th, 2022. It's like 3 weeks ago. From the Congressional Research Service, informing the legislative debate since 1914. Ooh, that's very official. Must all be accurate. Iran and nuclear weapons production. Background. Iran's nuclear program has generated widespread concern that Tehran is pursuing nuclear weapons. That sentence has been said for 15 or more years and has not changed. You want to talk about stalled century? No kidding. They just keep the story, drag it out. How much longer? Just keep dragging it out. According to U.S. intelligence assessments, Tehran has the capacity to produce nuclear weapons at some point. The same exact thing that's been said for over 15 years. But has halted its nuclear weapons program and has not mastered all of the necessary technology for building such weapons. This is not a joke, guys. Anybody that's over age 40, they said they were 6 months away 15 years ago. And they have access to every bit of information, internet information, underground stuff they paid for, Oppenheimer's original autobiography, all this stuff. They never were 6 months away. It was all about why would they cook up a story like, oh, I don't know, why would they ever lie to us? Remember that image I showed of all the military industrial complex and all the different Lockheed Martin, Boeing, General Dynamics, Northrop Grumman. They don't want to. You don't think they want a boogeyman? You don't think they want everybody to believe that Iran's just coming with nuclear weapons, so we need all this spending? No, you have to be a real conspiracy jerk to put that forth. You'd have to be a real head-up-your-ass jerk to believe it when these shit's been going on for 15 years. It's like the moon. How many hundreds of years have to go by before the RP starts to question anything? Let's just stay on this a few more minutes. Why would 60 Minutes over 10 years ago even do one of their biggest stories of all time was on Stuxnet, what this computer virus did to the Iranian centrifuges and slowed them up just a tiny bit and nobody noticed? Why would 60 Minutes even run the article? Why would they be allowed to run the article? Now the RP, they're starting to throw their rubber duckies and their heads of lettuce at me. I can hear the RP, well, Matt, obviously 60 Minutes didn't break anything to the Iranians and compromise national security. After the Iranians found out about it and it leaked out and the Iranians were already starting to fix the problem, then 60 Minutes ran with it. Well, yeah, I think I'm adult enough to understand that aspect of it, RP. I appreciate it. But let's just say what you did in running the 60 Minutes article, you tipped off every bizarro regime around the world if they were going to develop their Idi Amin nuclear program or Saddam Hussein or all these. See, there's a lot of loving and beautiful dictators around the world. They would never want a nuclear program. You just tipped everybody off that there's how this thing works and all the information that the 60 Minutes presentation provided. Maybe for somebody that's not running a centrifuge now, but would want to run a centrifuge later. See? They tipped them all off. If it was so sophisticated and it stumbled the Iranians up for years and years, this incredible Stuxnet, don't you see how 60 Minutes would never have even if they got a tip from Mr. Beaks in the Orange section, that they would have never been given access to the information where they could have researched it and provided this sort of, quote, intelligence on how the clandestine aspects of the CIA and other parts of the U.S. government operate to take down rogue regimes that try to develop nuclear programs. This story would have never made it. Matt, freedom of the press, you don't know. They can say whatever they want. Oh, I forgot. Yeah, of course. I forgot. All those Bill of Rights that I still have, I forgot all about that. Should I do a segment of this presentation between RP and CP? How every single one of the Bill of Rights has been destroyed? That doesn't even tip off the RP person. They just think that's normal. It's normal. I can't even talk on this channel without some sort of code Guys, I can't. We could do this all day. I'm not going to do any more from the If the World Were Real list. I'm just going to shut it down. See those things right there? Those shiny silver things? Ahmadinejad, or if he's still there, Ahmad Jim Jabber, if he's still there, he's probably, I don't think he's still there, but when he was, these pictures were taken the same way Kim Jong-un does his inspections of his junk. I'll tell you what's in those things. Nothing but ice cream. In those silver things, Matt, that's the fuel for the nuclear vessels. That ain't nothing but ice cream. Thanks for listening.